Well, what's next? Finding us for breathing? Let's begin. Well, first up, of course, we've heard of speed cameras. I myself, like many drivers, instantly glance at your speedo just to see how fast you're doing when you approach someone. But this next camera could potentially fine you for just driving normally, all dependent on how loud your car is. And that's right, according to the article, you could be fined £50 on the spot just by having a noisy car under new plans to roll out things called noise cameras. And they already apparently started trialling these cameras out in 4 areas: Kirkley, Kingswood, Great Yarmouth and Bromsgrove. And the article goes on and says that the government will look at the results before considering a further rollout of the cameras which targets drivers of noisy cars. Now, it may be all well and good, in principle, to have quieter streets, because let's face it, it's never nice as you try to watch something like EastEnders and some bell-end drives past and ruins a potential plot twist. I mean, I personally don't actually watch EastEnders, but I'm sure that'll be a familiar bugbear for a lot of people. But you have got to wonder where this is going, because let's face it, they could in theory reduce the noise level at which you'd be liable for a fine. But of course, according to the RAC, drivers are a bit split at the moment over the fine of the vehicle breaching the 74 decibel limit, and whether it's appropriate or not. And it does make you wonder, doesn't it, if this may be some sort of push to make us all go down the EV route before the 2035 deadline, because obviously EVs are quiet, aren't they? I mean, unless of course you're going under a speed of about 20 miles an hour, they're kind of quieter than a mouse is fast. So how long would it actually be before they start to lower the 74 decibel level, at which point you'd be fined, and therefore potentially push people over to buying EVs, because obviously they'd never be liable for one of these sort of fines, would they? But you've got to ask yourself, haven't you, just how often will they pick up false fines? I mean, imagine it, a Saturday night, a busy Saturday night when there's loads of drunk people out on the streets shouting their mouth off, singing loudly in tune, potentially creating a noise loud enough, if there's a lot of them, that would actually breach this limit. And what would happen if a car drives past at the same time? I mean, surely, in theory, of course, the driver potentially would be fined, wouldn't he, for these drunk people singing? Which you'd like to think, wouldn't you, that the camera would actually be able to tell the difference, because let's face it, it could create a lot of false fines. And of course, added to ULEZ, this is the last things us drivers need, isn't it? But the article goes on and says that a government white paper found that people living in deprived areas are up to 3 times more likely to complain about noise than those less disadvantaged locations. And let's face it, it's not nice for anyone to hear loads of loud noise all the time, especially if it's done by a load of boy racers. But surely it does make you wonder just how long it will be before they add something like this to the environmental concerns of cars, and any such charges they want to slap on in future, doesn't it? Next, we've got a nice boost for cash, and I say that because, according to this article, 2 mums apparently saved £166 a week switching from contactless payments to cash, as apparently experts say that using coins and pennies helps towards the budget. Well, just how have they done that? The article says that experts reckon that the practice of handing over cash actually makes us more mindful about the purchases and helps us keep track of spending. I'm guessing that's because we actually got physical cash rather than just playing out in our minds. Because let's face it, it can actually be quite easy nowadays, especially during the cost of living crisis, to forget how much we actually spent in a shop or two, can't it? And library assistant Cassie Cooper saved £106 a week by avoiding unnecessary spending after setting herself a strict £155.50 budget. And in November, apparently the post office saw its highest amount of customer cash withdrawals this year, totalling £878 million, up 7% from the £821 million withdrawn in October, and 5% higher than the £836 million withdrawn in November last year. So cash and the use of it is growing, which is good, isn't it? Because even though I myself don't tend to use it, unless of course I'm getting my hair cut because he only accepts cash, I am glad that it's actually having a boost, and therefore surely will stick around for much longer. Because let's face it, at the end of the day, that should always be a form of payment which is accepted no matter where you are. Admittedly, of course, having a bit of cash in your wallet, especially at Christmas time, can come in quite handy, can't it? And actually feels a bit nice than just having a debit card or Apple Pay, which is what I use, on your wrist. Although there is often the worry, isn't there, especially with all the illegal boat people coming over the seas who may or may not have criminal records we don't know of, about how safe it actually is nowadays carrying cash. Although hopefully people will be mindful of that when they're shopping. But in its annual report, the Banking Trade Association UK Finance said that 6.4 billion payments were made with cash in 2022, up 7% from 2021, but still dwarfed, apparently, by the 13.1 billion contactless payments made by credit and debit cards. But either way, sales assistant Laura Mayers saved £60 a week by splitting £120 in cash into envelopes for buying essentials such as food and petrol, which, let's face it, actually having the money in your hands could theoretically help you budget better and therefore save you a bit of money in the long run. So well done to these people that are doing it. And who knows, I might actually try it myself as well, because especially at this time of year, it can actually be quite costly, can't it? So anything that helps us is surely a good thing.
Well, you know, Rishi is doing really well, or not, in the polls as it is. Because let's face it, if anything, it's looking like the Conservatives are actually going to be the third party rather than the second, or potentially first, the way this is going. And so what does Rishi do to try and boost the polls? Well, apparently he has personally intervened, according to this article, to keep the £40 million VIP helicopter contract that he apparently loves. Well, isn't that just a great idea, eh? Especially when all that money, £40 million, could actually be used on something more worthwhile. I mean, why does he need a helicopter to go around in? Especially, of course, if that isn't exactly going to help their green agenda or environmental impact or whatever that they're going to try and reduce. Councils all over the place seem to be adding their own sort of ULEZ areas, don't they? But anyway, the article says that after the Ministry of Defence announced it planned to stop renting 2 Lux helicopters to allocate funds to key areas, Mr Sunak reportedly fought to keep them. And obviously, the PM has repeatedly been criticised for his taste for helicopter rides for exceptionally short distances, including one from London to Southampton, which, to be honest, is just ridiculous, isn't it? I mean, has he never heard of these things we all drive about, and what do they call them? Cars! I mean, obviously I could be wrong, but apparently his wife is a billionaire or something, so I'm guessing they're probably about as modern to him as a penny farthing to us or something like that. But last month anyway, Defence Secretary Grant Shapps ruled to keep the 2 helicopters, reportedly at the request of Mr Sunak. And of course, it seems like the Prime Minister, or unelected Prime Minister as I like to call him, will continue to take a short joyrides in the £40 million helicopters as he continues to be train shy, or common sense shy as I personally think. But in a statement, the Ministry of Defence said that all ministerial and senior defence official travel is undertaken using efficient and cost-effective travel arrangements. Well, yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean, I would have thought a train journey or a car journey would be much more expensive than a helicopter, because let's face it, we all fly about in them nowadays, don't we, eh? And he goes on and says that this contract was extended primarily in order to provide travel for the command functions of the Ministry of Defence. But of course, a Labour source previously said that his helicopter choices, it's ironic that the Prime Minister insists of this form of travel when mortgages are sky high thanks to the choices that the Tories made. Well, to be honest, Labour, let's face it, you haven't exactly made good choices yourselves in the past, have you, eh? But get this, other journeys that Sunak has flown to by helicopter is to Dover, apparently an hour-long train ride. I mean, there's just no excuse for this, is there? Because it is, whether he likes it or not, or accepts it or not, going to be much more cheaper for us taxpayers to pay for his travel in a train than a helicopter, and that money could actually go to more worthwhile causes. I mean, surely can't he see that? Is he that pig ignorant? And let's face it, at the end of the day, it just makes him a huge giant hypocrite, doesn't it? Whilst, of course, he probably expects us to be all little good boys and girls and buy brand new EVs for our next cars before the 2035 deadline, while at the same time, he goes about in his helicopters. Well, Rishi, read between the lines, eh?
Next up, we've got the NHS, or NHS as it's otherwise known, and they've apparently, according to this article, paid out a whopping £93 million to families of patients who died due to botched care. And there's just no excuse for this, is there, nowadays, is there? I mean, admittedly, they are often quite overwhelmed, aren't they, due to the constant amount of growing people. However, that doesn't mean that they can potentially, in some cases, give us treatment below standard or rush treatments, leading to potential errors and therefore leaving them in this mess in the first place. But the article says that a record 1,101 successful fatality claims against the NHS were settled for £93,349,775 in the last 12 months to April. And that money, of course, could have been used for better things, couldn't it? Actually buying equipment that the doctors and nurses or whatever need to carry out treatment successfully. And of course, I don't know, pay a few of their wages, because let's face it, doctors and nurses and quite a lot of the NHS seem to strike quite a bit nowadays, don't they? The worrying thing is, though, that this is apparently a 107% increase from 738 settlements worth £45.1 million in 2015 to 2016. But the true cost to the taxpayer, it says, was even higher, as the NHS paid £14.4 million of legal fees and £58.9 million for claimants' lawyers' costs, meaning that the total spent for the payouts was £166.6 million. You know, I don't know about you, but for the amount of time that this has actually taken to double, not 8 or 9 years, it's just shocking, isn't it? It does make me wonder how much it will take for it to double again. Especially, of course, if doctors or whoever else continue to strike, because what if they're striking, they're not in there doing the job, leaving the people in there's potential workload stretched even more, and therefore, of course, errors may happen, especially if the person who's trained to do the things a lot more better are out there on the picket line, which is the last thing anyone needs. And, you know, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to say that this is the complete cause of their errors, although let's face it, it's probably not bound to help them, has it? And if you live in Manchester, then if I was you, I wouldn't get ill, because apparently the Manchester University NHS Foundation Trust was ranked at the pile of the top for care claim flops, summing up £10.5 million worth of damages in a year of 131 deaths. Other trusts to hit three figures included the Mid and South Essex University Hospitals, Birmingham and United Lincolnshire Hospitals, which all paid out at least £9.5 million each. So just what are these errors? I mean, I don't know, did someone have a leg amputated if they went in for a broken arm or something like that? Well, apparently, according to the article, the NHS resolution statistics show a string of vital errors that led to the untimely deaths, and they include 21 fatalities caused by a delay in performing operations, 18 failures to correctly interpret x-rays, and 11 cases where bungling doctors actually forgot to get informed consent before surgical procedures. How bad is that? A further 23 deaths were linked to failures to follow up on abnormal test results, while 28 were apparently down to medication errors. And surely there is no excuse for this, is there? I mean, these people are presumably trained in universities to care and give us the treatment that we need. Because let's face it, we all pay our national insurance, and therefore us taxpayers don't expect any money given to the NHS to actually be paid to people for their botched treatment, do we? I mean, we expect people, and us, obviously, to get the treatment properly. Surely there needs to be some sort of government intervention here, and things do need to be put in place to make sure that things like this don't happen anymore, don't they? And just as this is coming out, apparently junior doctors are at it again. They're set to apparently trigger 9 days of strikes over Christmas by walking out on Wednesday, and as a months-long pay row breaks out, blocking efforts to cut waiting lists down from 7.7 million. And Paul Whiting, the chief executive of the patients group Action Against Medical Accidents, said a shortage of nurses and doctors, as well as record high waiting lists, could be behind a surge in the payouts. Well, it doesn't surprise me, and therefore surely the government really does need to get a grip on this situation. Of course, don't worry, because an NHS resolution spokesperson, I wonder how much he is getting paid, said that each claim represents an episode of harm with associated financial costs to the NHS, together with an immeasurable impact on patients, their families and healthcare staff involved. An NHS resolution is committed to sharing, learning from harm, and to help the NHS improve patient safety. Well, isn't that such a good idea? Maybe, just maybe, they should have been carrying out more checks to make sure they were giving patients treatment properly or operations properly in the first place, shouldn't they? And also, the Department for Health and Social Care spokesperson added, patient safety is paramount, and we have taken significant steps to improve the safety of care. Well, good. That fills me full of so much confidence. Let's just say I hope I don't get ill anytime soon.